What up, reader fam? Today I'm bringing you a video in my Books I've Read Recently series. The series on my channel where I share with you the books I've read recently. I've got 5 books to share with you today, some that I loved, some that I didn't love, so without further ado, let's get started. First up here I have the Booksplosion book of the month for the month of October, and we are working with HMH Teen, and that book is Wapa! Grim Lovelies by Megan Shepherd. Our live show for this book is going to be on November 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on my channel, so if this book sounds interesting to you, then you should pick it up, read it, and join us for the live show. This story follows a girl named Anouk who is a beastie, meaning that she was once an animal, but now she is taking on the form of a human. The thing is, her beastie form is attached to somebody, and that somebody gets murdered. So now she's got to figure out how she's going to stay in her beastie form before the spell fades away. The clock is going tick-tock, so she better hurry it up. I enjoyed so many different aspects of this book. I love the fact that it took place in Paris. Not only that, though, it's an urban fantasy, so we've got this already magical place, and then we're adding in magic, and reading about magic in an already magical place made it that much more magical. I've got the magic in me. Throwback. I also really loved the mystery aspect of the story. It's really honed in on Anouk kind of getting to the bottom of this murder, and it gets pretty intense because they don't have much time until Anouk turns back into her animal form. So they gotta kick things into high gear and get this show on the road. I also just really enjoyed the cast of characters. I do wish that they would have taken the LGBT character story in a different direction, but I really enjoyed reading about Anouk. She's kind of this character that longs to be out there in the real world because she doesn't really get the chance to. The person who is in control of her beastie form doesn't really let her experience the real world at all. So it was kind of fun to get to see her experience the real world for the first time despite the circumstances. One issue that I had with this book is one that I have with every young adult fantasy book, I feel like, and that's just the fact that it kind of took me some time to really get myself invested in this world and kind of understanding the magic system and whatnot. There were definitely times that I had to go back and reread different things to kind of fully allow it to set in. It's not even that the magic system is that complex. In fact, the magic in here is pretty simple, but all the terminology was just throwing your boy off. So I'd have to backtrack and reread to fully grasp everything. Also, you all know how I've been feeling about romance in YA books recently. I just haven't been fully on board with it, and I wasn't super keen on this romance either. Not saying it was bad, it just wasn't for me, and personally, it just wasn't the thing that I was looking for in this story. The good thing is that I left this book wanting the sequel, which is always a good sign when you're leaving a book and you're wanting more. But it also means that I've got questions that I need answered. So book 2, come at me and come at me strong. I'll be ready for ya. Next up I have here The Last Leaves Falling by Sarah Binwell, and this is a young adult contemporary story. This story follows a boy named Sora who is diagnosed with ALS, and due to this he is unable to attend school. So in order for him to kind of get that social aspect that he's missing from his life, he turns to online chat rooms. The story has both a focus on ALS and friendship. I have such mixed feelings about this book. I'm still just like, how do I feel? What is this feeling? So let's first talk about the things that I did like about this book. I first off liked how this book had a focus on friendship. That's something that I always really like seeing at the forefront of stories, especially when it's about a character who is lonely, because #relatable. Books like this give you hope that you will find friends one day. You just gotta hang in there. The second thing that I really liked is the fact that this book gave exposure to ALS. I feel like there aren't a lot of books out there talking about this right now, so it was really cool to read a book that has a focus on ALS. But those were really the only 2 things that I liked about this book. So what did I not like about this book? One, the first thing is that I didn't like the weak Japanese setting. Take away the very few Japanese references and it would have felt like this book could have taken place anywhere in the world. The descriptions were just really weak in my opinion, and I almost felt like some of the characters fell into some stereotypes. For example, she gave one of the characters a love for Studio Ghibli, and I know that Studio Ghibli is super popular in Japan, but it just kind of felt like a cop-out cliche character interest to me. The other thing that was my biggest iffy feeling with this book was just the direction the plot went in. After I finished this book, I dropped the book, rushed to Goodreads to see if anybody else had this kind of iffy feeling about this book. And there was only one other person that kind of had this uneasy feeling about it. So I don't know if I'm reading too much into this feeling that I had, but the ending made me super uncomfortable. This is a book that I went into wanting to love, but it just didn't quite hit the mark for me, and I'm pretty sad about it. Next up here I have The Storied Life of A.J. Vickery by Gabrielle Zevin, and this is an adult realistic fiction. This story follows a bookstore owner who is going through quite a few hardships. He's lost his wife, book sales are down, and his collection of rare poems have been stolen. But one day a gift is left for him in the bookstore, which at first he kind of thinks of it as a curse, but quickly his perspective changes as this gift kind of brings more joy to his life. He realizes that this gift he received is something that he needed to keep going in life. I love this book so much. It definitely worked its way onto my favorites list, and I'm totally going to overhype this book today, so I apologize in advance, but also sorry not sorry, because when you love a book, you should shout it from the rooftops. The thing is, this is a really simple story. It's not like it's this outrageously complex or unique story at all, but I liked how simple it was. It's kind of this story that's built up on all these little moments. We see these little sections of this person's life, the highs and the lows, and they're all just kind of strung up together to build up this story. And I really want to read more books that are kind of formatted like that, where the story takes place over a long period of time, but you only see these little moments, like you don't see the day to day, and it kind of jumps forward on the timeline. I really liked that aspect of this book. I don't need to see everything. I liked seeing just little bits and pieces. While it is a simple story, it does offer up some complex topics. It talks about suicide a little bit. It explores a struggling marriage, an abusive relationship. We follow this little girl who is struggling with identity, and we also follow this man who is trying to move on with his life after the passing of his wife. So it does cover a lot of darker themes, but I never really felt like it was drowning in darkness, because all in all, it's actually a pretty lighthearted read. I actually found it really interesting that I ended up liking this book, because when I first got into it, the main character is described as a book snob, and I was like, I am not about to waste my time reading about some book snob that thinks he's above everyone else just because he reads a certain kind of literature. But the more I read on, the more enamored I became with all of the characters. They all seemed to work their way into my heart, except for that one terrible character, which I'm not even gonna mention him. He does not deserve to be talked about. I lastly just want to mention a few lines from the Goodreads description of this book, because I feel like it's such a spot-on description with what you get with this book. And it's really vague, but after you read this book, you're just like, ah. And it reads, "We are not quite novels, we are not quite short stories. In the end, we are collected works." So good. Next up here I have The House with a Clock in Its Walls by John Bellairs, and this is a mystery horror fantasy story, question mark? I think that's what this book would be classified as. It's got a lot going on. This story follows this boy named Lewis who moved in with his uncle after his parents passed away, and after a few days of living with his uncle, he realizes that his uncle is a witch. In this book, we follow this quest of uncovering the mystery behind this mysterious ticking noise that's coming from within the walls of his uncle's house. I was not expecting to like this book as much as I did, but it was so much fun. I don't know if it was the fact that I was in the mood for a middle grade book, or if it was the fact that I was in the mood for just a short little old story, but it doesn't even matter because I enjoyed this book so much. And I read this book because I wanted to read it before the movie came out, which I still haven't seen the movie. Oops. It definitely gave off a spooky feeling, which now that I think about it, that's probably why I enjoyed it so much. It also weirdly has this cozy feeling to it, which I feel like doesn't really make sense. Spooky and cozy don't really go together. Reading this reminded me of that feeling I had when I read as a kid, where I was just so enchanted with the story and I wanted to devour it. I feel like I'm not doing a very good job of describing why exactly I like this book, but I think the thing that stuck out to me the most was just the atmosphere. It's kind of got this dark atmosphere to it. While I was reading this book, it felt like every scene took place in the nighttime, which it doesn't. There are scenes that take place during the day, but that's just because this book had a really dark vibe to it that I really liked about it. And also the mystery element was just so interesting to read about, especially as they start to uncover it. Wow, I was just super positive about this book. Do I have anything negative to say? I do. Okay, so one of the negative things that I do have to say about this book was the fact that it does feel like it's kind of on the choppy side of things, and I mean that with the overall movement of the story. But I don't got much else to say. I had a fun time reading this book, and that's all you need to know. Lastly, I have here Ironcast by Destiny Soria, and this is a historical fantasy story. It takes place in 1919, and we follow Ada and Corinne, who have the ability to create illusions through art. They both work in this nightclub called the Ironcast, but when they're not working in the club, they're working in the city trying to con the city's elite. When a job goes wrong, it leaves Ada imprisoned, and Corinne must figure out a way to rescue her. I really hate to end this video on a negative note, but that's what's gonna happen. I didn't really end up enjoying this book as much as I wanted to. I'm sad about it. I've recently been having this problem with a lot of YA books, where I'm so excited about the book because the concept sounds so cool, and then I read the book and it's executed poorly. easily. I could honestly make an hour-long discussion video about that, because it's happened with a lot of the books that I've read this year. Amazing concept, not so great execution. And this book fell into that category. I was stoked for the magic, stoked for the sisterhood, stoked for the time period, and it just didn't do what I wanted it to do. And I almost DNF'd this book too, but I wanted to give it a fair chance. I wanted to see that maybe it would turn and go into a different direction. And to be fair, this book starts on a high note. I was like, this book is going to be a banger. But the story just moves off in a direction that doesn't push off that beginning epic opening note. It could have used that opening sequence as momentum to move the story forward and push off into something epic. But things just get really slow in terms of the pacing, and then the plot just really needed something extra to make it more interesting. I really hate critiquing this book too, because it does do some things right. Like, we've got some great diversity in terms of race, and then we've also got some positive girl gang vibes, which is always a good thing, but it just lacked in terms of development of characters, direction of plot, and its inability to keep me fully invested in the story. So those were 5 books that I have read recently. You guys should let me know down below in the comments if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. I want to hear all your thoughts on these books. But if you haven't read any of these books, then let me know down below in the comments a book that you've read recently and your thoughts on it. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. I post videos frequently on this channel, so if you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe, or go and click the little bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye, chew.